Hi, my name is Candace Haas. Thanks for watching the Friends of the Farm lecture series. Each session is designed to deliver a small and in-depth dose of cannabis education. I wanted to thank all of our viewers and customers from the pharmacy, the pottery, and the Natural Healing Center, as well as all of our friends joining us from around the world. We have other incredible webinars on terpenes, formulations, sustainability, medical uses, history, travel, and cannabinoids. So please make sure to hit subscribe so you get notified when we post future cannabis content. In today's webinar, we're going to be breaking down retail taxes in California. We'll be discussing how cannabis is taxed in California, where the collected cannabis tax money is allocated, gain insights into the upcoming changes in the cannabis excise collection in 2020 and their potential impacts. Our guest speaker is Lauren Vázquez, who will discuss the IRS tax code changes, 280E, and impacts cannabis businesses will have, and how reclassifying 280E and Schedule 3 could affect retail tax structures. Lastly, find out how cannabis consumers who are patients can have less taxes and how to get involved and how to advocate for changes in retail cannabis taxation. Lauren Vázquez is affectionately known by her peers as the fired up attorney. She is a corporate cannabis attorney and social entrepreneur who has worked for 2 decades to end cannabis prohibition and advance alternatives to the failed war on cannabis. Lauren has practiced business law since 2009 and entered private practice in 2011. Throughout her advocacy, she has helped shape state and local cannabis policy. She has advised numerous cannabis companies and organizations and helped many legacy and equity operators. Lauren has been a professor at Oaksterdam University since 2011 and is the current chair of the legal department. In 2016, Lauren was a senior advisor of the Statewide Outreach Manager for the successful state Prop 64 campaign that legalized cannabis in California. And what it's important to note is that there are very few people that were hired from the cannabis industry to work on this campaign, and Lauren was one of the 3 people that were. So huge kudos to her. And I met Lauren 20 years ago when, as I have on the screen here, that she was the president of UCSB NORML. So Lauren is a longtime drug reform veteran with more than 2 decades of experience. Today, she helps cannabis businesses navigate licensing and regulatory compliance and has always helped people achieve their cannabis dreams. Lauren's accomplishments should not be underrated, and we all have her to thank for the freedoms that we enjoy today. This is, something that I'm very happy to have her on here to speak about today. She's been a longtime friend and colleague of mine, and so I'm excited to have her with us today to talk about this topic, which does not really sound very sexy, but it's something that I talk about with customers every single day. Why is my cannabis? Why is my medicine so expensive? I try to break it down and answer all these questions. Of course, I am not an attorney or a tax professional, and so I'm so excited to have her on with us today. And of course, as you guys can see, if you're regular watchers, I'm not in the office. I'm at home, so please bear with me if we have any technical difficulties. Things don't go as fast here, but I'm really happy to have Lauren with us today to answer all my questions and to kind of break down cannabis taxation for all of you guys and to help you guys maybe learn about what we can do to kind of change things in the future, how to maybe save some money for patients, and to kind of understand what's going on. So thank you so much, Lauren, for being with us today.
Thank you, Candace. You have me blushing, I must say. Candace is one of my best friends and longtime colleagues. We both got started through NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and here we are today. So I'm very honored that she has asked me to participate in this and to share all of this information with you. I will say that as a spokesperson for Prop 64, probably my only complaint was the tax rate and the taxes impacting the costs for patients and consumers. So we'll get into the current taxes and what they're used for and why are we just so darn expensive. Go for it.
But it's always a give and take. If we were going to get, huge change in the stigma around cannabis. If we were going to get regulated and safe cannabis, there was going to be something we had to give. And there's definitely a cost in regulating cannabis. And so that's exactly what we're going to talk about.
We did advocate for tax and regulate cannabis for many years, and now they tax and regulate it. So it's a marathon advocacy and social change. So it goes step by step. And of course, we want to make sure that cannabis is affordable and, make the taxes as reasonable as possible and have legal cannabis.
Definitely. Well, thank you again for all the work that you've done for many, many, many years. And I'm glad to have you as my colleague and my friend. So very excited to share all this information today. So let's just kind of start at the beginning. So for those people that are watching, what are the current taxes that most of us are paying? I know that it's not same in all jurisdictions, but for the majority of us, what are the taxes that most folks are paying if they're buying from a legally licensed cannabis dispensary?
Okay. Are we reading a poll, Candace?
I don't have one specifically set up for this question, but you can, I did launch the first one, and the first one was, is it showing you on your?
How much are you willing to pay in tax per $100? So this is the first poll. The answer A through E options, $10, $15, $25, $30, $35. So if you're watching right now live, you can select your answer, and you can also just put it in the chat. And you could, if you're watching this later on YouTube, just think to yourself, what are you really willing to pay when it comes to these breakdowns? What am I willing to pay? I ask myself that same question. All right, submit it. And if you do know your tax rate, you can go ahead and throw it in the chat. Some of us are in places where it's really high. Some of us are in places where it's maybe it's reasonable, but you can gripe in the chat if you'd like. And we are obviously talking about taxes because the question to why does my weed cost so darn much is two things: the costs that impact the retail sale price, and then taxes. So we'll jump into taxes. Let me just bring up the few really important costs that make cannabis businesses so much more expensive than any other industry, really, most other industries. So you have the cost of getting a license, applying for it, jumping through all the hoops and doing everything that goes into that, as well as the actual licensing application fees and the annual fees. And then the cost of compliance, complying with all the regulations on a daily basis. It's quite extensive and onerous and costs a lot of money and staff time and, a lot more than most retail businesses or manufacturers would have to worry about. Other things that affect the cost of your cannabis is the wholesale cost. What are the retailers getting it for from the manufacturers and the cultivators? And retailers that are vertically integrated are going to be able to charge what they want, and they can hopefully keep their prices lower. Mm-hmm. So some retailers do have that advantage. If they are vertically integrated, doesn't necessarily mean that they'll charge lower prices, but they can. And then some of the things that cost cannabis businesses is waste. The way we have products expire and they can't be reused, they have to be taken out of inventory. And then also, unfortunately, we're subject to all the robberies and attacks and all the costs that puts onto businesses and puts some retailers out of business. So those are all kind of the practical costs of operating your business. And then the taxes. So Candace mentioned IRS 280E. What is that? That's the federal tax code that says you can't deduct expenses for your drug dealing business. It means that cannabis businesses pay much higher taxes because the income that they're paying on doesn't include all of the deductions that a normal business would be allowed to have. So right now, every cannabis business is paying much more federal income taxes than they should have to in a legal industry, in a legal framework. And so that's adding to the cost of your cannabis as well. So all of the operating costs and then the taxes that are, a special penalty for the cannabis industry. However, the one of the concrete benefits coming from rescheduling, the announcement at the federal level that the DEA has started the rulemaking process to do that, is that IRS 280E specifically applies to Schedule 1 and not Schedule 3 drugs. So that will go hopefully soon. The rulemaking process is already underway. Public comment deadline just passed. So with rescheduling, this really big expense for cannabis businesses that impacts the consumers is going to go away. That's one of the biggest benefits of rescheduling, even though we need a lot more than that. So that's the business operating costs, including the federal taxes. And then we have all of the state and local taxes. So, Candace, what do we want to know about those?
So, what is the current excise tax that all California consumers have to pay right now on their retail purchases?
15%. What does that mean? What is an excise tax? An excise tax is a special tax on a certain product that is actually levied on you, the consumer, but the way it's collected and paid is through the retailer. And you prove that you paid by having a receipt that shows you paid. So 15% on what? Well, that's part of the problem, is that it ends up being a tax on a tax. And so the excise tax is on the gross receipts of the cannabis business. The gross receipts includes almost everything. So you can see this graphic from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration on everything that gets calculated in there. So you could see the actual product price, but then if there's a local cannabis tax, that's included. And if there's a delivery fee or any other service fees or an extra fee for packaging, any extra fee is going to be included in the gross receipts. So that's a lot, and that can get pretty onerous and also very confusing to calculate. So you have the sale price, the local cannabis tax, and then locals might also charge business tax that the retailer might decide to pass on to you. That would be on the receipt. So everything here in this graphic is taxed at 15%. And then on top of that is the state sales tax. Yeah. So that's why it ends up being really a tax on a tax on a tax, because gross revenue includes the local business tax. So the excise tax is a tax on a tax. And then the sales tax is a tax on the excise tax. So this is the system under which we currently function or dysfunction.
I would say, like, for the majority, though, most cannabis consumers, by making legal purchases, are paying what they would see on the receipts. It's probably three, though, right? The 15% excise, cannabis tax that probably ranges from like 5 to 10%, like a special cannabis tax the city has set. Like in Santa Ana, it's like 6%. In LA, it's like 10%. And then the regular sales tax, which could be like 7.5% to like 8.5% that you pay on everything. So we're looking at like 32%, right? 32 to 35%.
We pay 10% up in the Bay Area. That's I want to pay 7%. That sounds nice. We're up at 10%.
So we're looking at 35% for cannabis purchases.
Yes. So that's the excise tax, but we do want everyone to know that it is up for amendment coming up next year, because as of July 1st, 2025, the legislature has to adjust the excise tax rate. and it's kind of a complicated consideration, but they have to raise it in order to make sure that some of the programs that are allocated to by Prop 64 are adequately funded. And to do that, they're basing it on a prior budget, which allocated $670 million to those programs and funds. So the budget has to show that we're going to get that much funding again, or the excise tax will go up. They have to make sure that the tax, if they're going to increase the excise tax, it has to be by May 1st of 2025, and then it would be effective July 1st, 2025. You can see here in this report, I believe this is from the legislative office, that they are projecting 670 million, and that's unchanged. And then other projections is that it's going to continue for 675 for 2023, and then 2024 789 million. So we're on track. Hopefully that means they won't increase the excise tax. Some people are worried that it will automatically increase to the maximum, which is 19%.
Please no.
But we'll have to see how it plays out. So we'll know by May, but it is based on this minimum amount of funding and how much the percentage needs to be to meet that minimum. And that's where we are on that.
I think it's always interesting too, if we look at how cannabis is taxed compared to like other substances that are taxed as well in the state of California. So this is something that you sent to me from California NORML, which is a wonderful organization that represents cannabis consumers throughout the state of California here. It's been around nearly 50 years. So do you want to talk about this graphic that you sent me?
Yeah, they put this together. I thought it was really, really interesting, and the way they do the calculations and how much higher the taxes are for cannabis. Also, the name of the article below, the caption, California Tax Fund Monies Diverted, that's an article by Cal NORML. You could just Google it, look it up on their website. And it goes in depth on how the California taxes are being allocated and how they're actually maybe being misallocated to programs that it wasn't really intended to fund. And so that's a really in-depth article. I could not cover everything in it here. So take a look at that. It's extremely helpful. I will briefly explain just, we had, let's see, what were the numbers? Already for 2024, we've collected $259 million in taxes in California. 152.5 was the excise, and 107.4 was the sales tax. The total of all taxes collected since the start in January 2018 is $6 billion.
Wow.
That's 3.1 in excise tax and 2.4 billion in sales tax. And that number also includes 501 million in the cultivation tax that we no longer have. So we've contributed to the economy $6 billion. And how does that get spent? It's divided into 3 tiers. The first tier is just covering all the administrative costs of the DCC and licensing. So in Prop 64, we made sure it paid for itself. And then there's tier 2, which is dedicated to research and economic development. And this is where the legislature can start to change these allocations, but not until 2028. And then there's tier 3. And so tier 3 distributes whatever's left over after tier 1 and tier 2 are paid for. And it's divided into 3 things. 60% youth education and prevention, 20% for environmental restoration, and 20% for local law enforcement grants. And we did put in a restriction that if the local government bans cannabis businesses, any category of cannabis businesses, they're not eligible for those local law enforcement grants. And then at this point in that fund for those grants, there's $260 million in unspent funds, because there's not enough cities and counties applying for the money. So while it does set aside money for the police, it's not being paid out. I'm not sure why the local governments don't want to go through the trouble of getting their money. So these can all be amended in not until 2028. And unlike other tax bills, this can be amended just by majority vote of the legislature, but they can't reduce the minimum amount of funding in tier 3. So they can change the categories, they can add categories, but whatever is there as of 2027, they can't go below that. So, we did direct the tax revenue to important things. And yeah, $6 billion, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we estimated that much within the first 5 years, but good job.
Yeah, that's a lot of money that the cannabis industry, cannabis consumers added to the overall, fund of California and important programs that we've been able to, bolster. I can say too that I've been to several symposiums put on by universities that were funded by Prop 64. Some of the research I feel has been advantageous, and then some of it has been I feel like has been beneficial to the opponents, has been like questionable. But I love to see like where the money is going. Sometimes I feel like it's been used almost against us, unfortunately. So I would love to see a little bit more oversight of where that money is given. But I do like to see that it's broken up and it is spread across, that we're giving it to environmental, that we're giving it to, I've seen also that like there's single mothers receive a good portion of money and support from Prop 64, and that, we're giving money to medicinal cannabis research. Wish it was like a little bit more, but I believe that they're probably also getting some money from this university fund as well as pouring also into this medicinal cannabis research. So it's great. And I love also that it's flexible and that they have, statutory timelines when like we can readjust these funds, which is also really good. So I think this is probably really interesting too, to like everybody that's watching. And I think that they probably had like no idea that it was broken up in such a way. So this is really cool. What did you kind of find that was most interesting about how it was broken up here?
I like how it gives funding directly to the universities. The Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research is at UC San Diego. And also, I believe UC Davis has been getting a lot of the grants to study implementation. The funding to the CHP to study DUIs has ended, so that funding can go elsewhere. And then the $10 million grants for economic development, that's been increased already at this point to $50 million. So that's part of what you're talking about with supporting the childcare and after school programs and youth prevention programs, because we didn't want to punish youth or force them to be expelled or force them into the justice system. We just want to send you on the right path. So I like how we're supporting good things in the world, because for so many years we were told that as cannabis and cannabis users were bad people up until very recently, up until now, the opponents of rescheduling. We're bad people as cannabis consumers. So no, we're not. We care about our communities, and if it's going to be taxed, we want it to go to the right things. So I will say, some good news is that we have already amended and repealed some of the taxes. So you wanted to know what taxes we got rid of. So we did have a cultivation tax, just so everybody knows. It was based on weight and flowers versus leaves versus wet plants. And
even like trim was like was taxed and everything. If you were going to use that to like make another type of concentrate or product or whatever, everything in cultivation was taxed.
It was all taxed, and then in July of 2022, it was just repealed because the governor thought it was okay, and we all wanted it. So that ended. That was great. And then as of January 2022, they changed it so that trade samples were not taxed, and that helps businesses, and that kind of is part of some of what we like about the cannabis industry and the events and samples, trade samples, not necessarily samples for patients, but trade samples can be used to help patients and help us get better products on the market. And then in SB 34, we amended
2019.
we amended the law so that donations wouldn't be taxed. That was an oversight, because all cannabis was going to be taxed. The way the excise tax was done at the time was a different calculation. So it did require a tax on donated cannabis to patients, and that prevented retailers from donating cannabis. So there's no excise tax on patient donations now. There's also, just according to the CDTFA, there's no taxes on products that have been stolen, because they weren't
Oh,
given to the end consumer. And
that's
we
good
have
to
the
know at
whole,
least.
yeah, exactly. We have the whole hemp world that's still to be determined on how they're going to do that. So we did do that. I mentioned that there was a different way the excise tax was calculated before January 2023, and that was really complicated and really confusing to the consumer, because it was calculated on the back end on how much the wholesale market price was, but there was a standard formula for the wholesale market price and when that was supposed to be applied. And so retailers were just applying it incorrectly, and it was not good for anyone. So they changed the calculations to simply be on the gross receipts of the business. So that kind of changed everything for the better. And then we had AB 195 pass, and it laid out this baseline for increasing the excise tax, but it did also create some tax credits for first for equity businesses. So essentially, the equity retailers, their effective tax rate is 12%, not 15%, just based on the credits that they can get. And then certain companies that employ a certain number of workers or provide certain benefits can also get some excise tax credits. So that's helpful for them, and kind of not really that well known. And then, the excise tax is a tax on a tax. And so there was a bill last year to end that, meaning that the excise tax would, or the sales tax would not include the excise tax. I'm sorry, that the excise tax would not include the local business tax. But that failed, and it's been reintroduced as SB 1059 for this new legislative session. So we were able to reform some of the taxes, and we're still working on that. So SB 1059 is one that everybody should support.
Yeah, and I put that in the chat right here too. And California NORML has a pre-written letter, I think we saw just before we came on live. So if anybody watching live, or if they're watching in 2024 on YouTube and they want to get active and help this tax get passed and reduce consumer taxes, you can send a pre-written letter. It takes just a couple seconds and help this vital tax get passed and kind of straighten out some of these tax issues, because with consumers, and we know how much we all consume and how the taxes can stack up, any little bit helps. So great that we keep pushing this forward every year. If the tax bill doesn't pass this legislative session, we will be back next year with another one, not giving up, trying to help advocate for those that need this medicine or this plant in their life, and helping make it affordable for everybody. So is there other ways that patients can reduce the money, the tax money that they pay every month?
Yeah. There's ways that everybody can reduce your cannabis costs. Going to back up on the taxes real quick just to make it clear. So we have an excise tax based on gross receipts. Gross receipts includes the local cannabis tax and any local cannabis business tax that the retailer puts on your receipt. It doesn't include non-cannabis products like lighters and some vape batteries and things like that. So one of the things you're going to want to do is look at your receipt when you leave the retailer, because you want to make sure they're actually taxing you correctly. The CDTFA, California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, I'll type that acronym here, CDTFA. You can just Google them and excise tax, and retailers, and it will show sample receipts of how the taxes are actually supposed to be calculated. And you can make sure that your retailer is doing it right. And if they're not, go back and tell them and get a refund. because some of them I think are including those non-cannabis items in the tax, just depending on if their POS system is even capable of distinguishing or not. So make sure that you're just being taxed correctly. And then other things that you could do. So for patients, if you get the state medical marijuana ID card, this is optional, not required, but it is required, and you will get sales tax exemption. So that sales tax is on top of the excise tax. And in a lot of places, it's 9 or 10%. I want to know where 7% is happening. So that's it. That's a pretty big deal. The card used to be really expensive in some places, but in Prop 64, we capped the cost at $100. And according to California NORML, they did some research. And if you spend at least $100 per month on cannabis, then it is worthwhile for you to pay for the $100 card to get the sales tax exemption. And then you can also get reciprocity in other states. That's a benefit of having the ID card. If you go to a state that's only medical and you want to purchase or not go to jail, the state ID card from California is what you would need for those protections. And then we mentioned donations. The pharmacy and folks, a lot of dispensaries are doing free patient donations, free giveaways, and to receive donations, you don't need the ID card. You just need a doctor's rec. Now, every retailer can have their own policy, but by law, you only need the doctor's rec to get donations. You need the ID card to get sales tax exemptions. So there's those for benefits, and there's a few other things kind of look out for. So one is that just retailers can decide to put the sales tax in the price and just give you one price. So if they do that, they have to put a sign up. So look for the sign that says sales tax included, and you know that's going to be your final price. And you're not going to like be at the register. What? Oh my goodness. So look for the sign, sales tax is included in the price. Another way to avoid the sales tax is if you are able to buy from Native American tribes. They are any of their retail taxes are not included in the sales tax calculation. So you do pay sales tax, but the excise doesn't include it. So there you go. Support the Native American tribes. And then let's see, the one other one that maybe people don't know about, and I don't even really know if it's happening all. Maybe somebody can report to us, someone watching live or later on YouTube at any point. Maybe this might develop. But if you are part of a true cooperative with a shared ownership model, the taxes don't apply. So no sales tax, no excise tax. And this is going back to the model that we had under Prop 215, where we're all part of an organization and we share the effort and we share the cannabis. A true cooperative has shared ownership structures, and each owner is entitled to a certain share depending on what they've contributed. And your cannabis share won't be subject to sales or excise tax. Do you know of anybody doing cooperatives like this currently?
So it's sort of like they're almost like operating under like a SB 34 model almost.
No, because it doesn't have to be for patients. It's just like, you could go to there's like
a gifting model.
Yeah, there's farmers markers co-ops, right? So or
I don't. Yeah, I've not. Yeah, I haven't heard of anybody testing that.
Okay.
Or, yeah.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
It could be for patients or adult use. Doesn't necessarily have. It doesn't have to be medical. And it's just the concept that everybody owns the product to begin with because they own a share in the cooperative. So you don't pay taxes on something you're being given because you own it. So that's something I'm not seeing at all. Maybe somebody will want to take that route. So, being a patient can save you on taxes, being observant of the signs and your receipts and making sure you're being charged accurately. You can see the way your receipt is supposed to look on the CDTFA website. And then paying attention to how the taxes are changing and make sure you're not being overcharged.
Yeah, I love that. And then always just being, I guess, a conscious consumer too, and watching out for good promos and BOGOs and all those kind of things that a lot of like the well-run managed dispensaries tend to do for their consumers, like to gain loyalty and all that kind of stuff is a good way that patients and consumers can really like make their money stretch, but those are all like really good tips, which consumers that tend to, use the product a lot will be appreciative of. So that's really good stuff.
You did mention getting involved through NORML. There is another issue, the tax exemption for the businesses to give donations. It does expire next year. Mm-hmm. And so there is a new Assembly Bill 2555 that is there to extend the tax deduction exemption. The donations would still be allowed, but the companies wouldn't get the tax exemption and therefore really couldn't afford it. Or it's just not clear what the tax would be on. If a donation is zero, would the tax be on zero? Or would it be calculated on something else that would mean the retailers couldn't afford it? So again, on NORML's website, AB 2555, addressing the tax that expires in 2025. So again, if you're watching this later on YouTube, it's still relevant for you to get your voice heard.
Yeah, and that's a very important issue to patients because it's kind of like an unknown, but could definitely impact like their ability to obtain very important medicine. Another thing I wanted to touch on too, because I think it's very important, but how do you think that, rescheduling cannabis to a 3, and changing the 280, tax structure so that, cannabis dispensaries can claim that deduction, how do you think that will impact prices? And therefore, if the prices are lower, the taxes will therefore be lower. And if businesses can take this 280E deduction, how do you think that'll impact prices for consumers?
Oh, that's pretty interesting because kind of what you're talking about is shifting the tax revenue and where it's coming and going. So
would it even
280E right now, the feds are taking all the tax revenue, and then the retailers have to charge a certain price in order to be able to survive the market. And so that's affecting what the state collects on the taxes. So if the IRS 280E gets wiped out, the taxes will go to normal amounts at the federal level. We don't know how that will impact consumer prices because maybe they think they'll just keep charging an arm and a leg, or maybe competition will start to bring the prices down. And if the prices come down, that's going to affect the California tax revenue. So there's a lot of ways that could impact the price at the cash register. Some of it's just going to be up to the retailer, and some of it is, supply and demand. I personally shop based on price. For cannabis is cannabis. So, when you go and tell them, hey, I can't afford your $80 eighth. I can't afford your $20 eighth. I can afford your $35 ounce. Thank you very much. Let them know, because they will be setting the prices once they get the benefit of 280E. A lot of smaller businesses will be able to hang in there, not necessarily compete with the big guys, but this has really been hampering every cannabis business. So it's a really big deal to repeal 280E.
Yeah. And without the federal illegality and without, the high tax costs and cost of doing business, the cost of cannabis may hopefully come down to that price of $30 an ounce. I mean, how much does it cost to grow tomatoes? It's only the cost of prohibition that really, artificially increased the price of cannabis. So in all hopes, maybe we can really bring that down to something that is reasonable. And even if we did have to tax at such a high level, the price coming down would just, make it more reasonable for people. So it is something that is yet to be seen, whether, rescheduling will happen. If it does happen, how will that affect 280E? Will it only, will only those companies, that have, products that have, gained, Schedule 3, products on the market will get that 280E, or will everybody be able to claim 280E? Well, who knows? We don't know yet.
Fortunately, IRS 280E is only like 2 sentences long, and it's very clear that it doesn't apply to Schedule 3. So that would immediately impact all cannabis businesses. But cannabis businesses will continue to remain illegal under federal law because Schedule 3 requires certain FDA testing and approval of the cannabis medicines, and it also requires registration with the DEA by everyone in the supply chain, from the cultivators manufacturers, distributors, pharmacists, retailers, everyone has to register. And we have yet to see what forms of cannabis will be rescheduled. Will the flowers be rescheduled? Will botanical drugs be allowed? Or is it just going to be, something that's in a pill or capsule form, or something that's, injected in a hospital for severely sick patients? But it's not going to be your wedding cake kush flowers that you just picked up from the store down the street that has a California license, but is not a pharmacy. So we are hoping that Schedule 3 is just a temporary interlude, because we need much, much more comprehensive legislative change to enact the end of prohibition. Just like, there's many other provisions, like 280E is stuck in there. We have so many other provisions in the laws that need to be repealed and changed so that people effectively can have cannabis, not go to jail, buy it at a store, and companies can provide it to them. So there's a bill, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act, that was introduced by Booker and Schumer and a few others. And you can take a look at that. And an interesting part of that is it levies a federal excise tax. I think it's my only complaint is the rate on that. And do we need another tax? I don't think so. But that is the type of comprehensive form, including equity provisions. And it might not pass, but that's what we need. So rescheduling is on track with the rulemaking process, maybe a year, and a bill could be passed this year or next year, even later. But rescheduling is just, a half step, and we'll have to see if the Booker-Schumer bill passes. So that's another thing we want to support. And if it doesn't pass, then the next iteration of that is what we need.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was a lot of really good information, but it has opened the conversation and it's changed the stigma. And like you said, it's a half step forward and it's going to take a long time. They've received, I think, like over 50,000 comments. And it's going to take them a tremendous amount of time to go through all that. And hopefully something like more comprehensive happens in the meantime. So that was a really good answer.
Yeah, majority of those comments. I think somebody used AI to go through all of those comments, because the period ended on Monday, and I just saw an article that said that they had gone through and classified them, and a majority of the comments were in support of rescheduling and even broader reforms, not a bunch of organizations and people saying to keep it in Schedule 1. So that's very positive. Thank you to everybody who put those comments in there. And they're going to review them and come out with a response and amendments to rescheduling. And we'll just keep going through this like we have to do at the local level, the state level, and then we'll do it at the federal level. But there are a lot of ways for you guys to get involved. We've mentioned NORML a number of times because they have such great information and they make it so easy for you to contact your legislators on these really important bills. They also sponsor an annual lobby day where we all go to Sacramento together, and we meet with our legislators either from our district or another district that we need to get in front of. And that's in May. And Candace and I went with a bunch of other cannabis activists. Honestly, I spent a day with my friends and heroes, people who've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, long before I was even born. And so it's lobbying and learning and networking. And you can also directly contact your representatives about the taxes and how they impact your ability to afford medicine or afford the legal market. And then also tell the DCC, let them know what you think. They've got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email, newsletter, and you can just get info@calcannabis.com.
Yeah.
Just email them, and they have a complaint form on the website, and just tell them, yeah, the taxes are too darn high. You can't afford it. And they do listen, and they do take all of this in, as well as the governor. The governor led the end of the cultivation tax. So we just gotta,
And the Blue Ribbon Committee, right? Too, that was the beginning of Prop 64, right?
Tell them what we want. Just tell them what we want. And they've been really good at it because they do want legal cannabis to work. And if we can't afford legal cannabis, is it really legal? Kind of not really. So, yeah, make sure that you just get involved, because nobody else is going to fight for you except for a few good people out there. You count NORML and Ellen and Dale and Carla and all the chapter leaders as well. Everybody who shows up at Lobby Day from all over the state of California. It's really impressive.
I know that you're also the legal chair at Oaksterdam University, which shout out to Oaksterdam, amazing institution, which is, crafted some of the leaders that we have in the industry today, including like Mama Sue Taylor and her son, who we work with, she's the director of Pharmacy Berkeley. Is there any courses that you would say at Oaksterdam University that would be great for people that are kind of like interested in like this kind of like stuff, like taxes, accounting, legal stuff, or like what courses you teach if people want to learn more from you?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I really enjoy teaching the classes there because they're all really relevant to current events and, the changes in federal law and everything that's just happening at the federal level, and not just with cannabis, but just the checks and balances and the three branches of power and everything that we have going on right now. So we do offer through oaksterdamuniversity.com. We have free webinars that are geared towards consumers. And then if you are a business, we have courses that you could take. We have different tracks, whether you want to open your own business or whether you want to get training so that you can get hired in the industry. We're really doing a lot of work right now to help workers gain skills so that you can get some of these jobs in the cannabis industry. And I did a webinar recently on the impacts of rescheduling. So check out the website because there are some free offerings that are more targeted towards consumers. And then if you're looking for a job or to start a business, we have our whole course offerings with teachers that have been, visionaries in the cannabis industry for years throughout the country, not just Californians. So I really enjoy teaching the classes and meeting students from all over the world. Now that we're online, that's very easy. And sharing our experience with other states and other countries, making sure that they can learn from California and not repeat our mistakes. Look at our tax structure and don't copy our tax structure. There are some newer states like Michigan and Connecticut. I'm looking at their regulations because Oaksterdam has been doing some of the technical assistance services that the equity applicants are eligible to receive. So what that means is we provide online courses and training for the equity applicants specifically. And I've been able to do that in some other states and learn about their tax structures and everything else, and just help equity business owners succeed in the industry. So I really enjoy it, and it's really great for consumers and businesses.
I love that. And they get to learn from, you and Dale, like people with experience that have actually been, working in the industry for like 20 years, which is, I think that's wonderful, instead of like just contracting out to like a, business that's just trying to get like a proposal, just make money off of a new burgeoning industry. So I think that
we're really excited that the cities and the states have recognized Oaksterdam in that way and have lent us that, credibility and confidence in what we have to offer. And it has been really amazing just to see what all these people can do when they're given the right resources. So we've done the equity for Los Angeles, Oakland, Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey. It's just, look at all these states that are coming online with adult cannabis. So exciting.
That's really cool. I have one question from the audience. Do you have a second to answer a couple quick questions?
Yes, and I have a poll in front of me as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I launched the rest of the polls. Cool. So somebody's asking, how do compliance costs, licensing, development agreements, all those kind of things, how do those add to the cost of cannabis?
It's just the operating expenses of the business and how much it costs them, and then what they have to charge for the products to recover that. So there's a lot of costs for compliance on a daily basis when it just comes to having staff oversight and making sure things are done. And the way that things have to be implemented are more complicated and require more steps and time and effort than any other cannabis businesses. So those costs add up. But licensing, if you have to pay $500,000 a year for your cannabis license, that's going to impact what you can charge for the products. So all of that overhead basically
Yeah.
is what goes into the calculations of what they have to charge just to cover their bills,
Their
let
markup.
alone make a profit off of it.
Yeah.
So
Their
that's
markup.
how that applies.
So if you want to be a savvy consumer, you could be like, well, I know this city requires so much of a development agreement, or it's more expensive to operate in that city, where I know it's not expensive to operate in this city. I know that the markup's probably going to be less here than it is there, or whatever, so all costs rolled in, just like it would be more expensive to buy something inside of an airport than it would be outside of the airport. Certain cities are going to be more expensive because of the operating costs, the same thing as like for cannabis. And so that's why it's also probably important to lobby when your city is regulating cannabis to have affordable costs, for them to do business, because it actually affects the consumers and the patients. It's not just a windfall for the city, it actually hurts the residents in that city. So, it's all a cycle. It's not just like money comes out of the air for nowhere and it's like a windfall for the cities, So that's a good question, though. Thank you for answering that. Did you want to go over some of the poll results from today?
I've got, what is an excise tax? Or is that's the open one? Open. I don't know how to check them. I'm sorry.
I could do it. Sorry. So I kind of threw some funny ones in there too, but I was asking people, how much are you willing to pay in tax per like $100? So instead of saying like what percent, I was kind of trying to play with money amount. And it came out 50%. Same answer. People were saying $10 or $15. So between 10 and 15% was like the amount of tax that people felt comfortable with. So 10 to 15% was, what people felt comfortable with. That's actually double what we pay in regular standard retail. So people were willing to double regular tax for cannabis. I think that seems pretty reasonable myself too. And then I said a scale of 1 to 10, how much does tax actually play into your purchasing decision? And it looks like same answer. People said it plays a number 2. It plays a 9 or 10 into their purchasing decision. So some people feel like it plays a lot into their purchasing decision. And then one person said not very much. So not very many people voted in on that. And then another question was, I was kind of trying to throw a little funny one in there, but how can patients save money and avoid paying local sales tax? And I said, get a medical cannabis recommendation, or the second one was get a recommendation and your state ID card. And the third one was a veteran status. Now, although we wish that having a veteran status would get you exempt from the taxes, and it should, unfortunately, that's not the law, and it's just having your state ID card. So thank you for everybody that voted in those poll questions. And then the last thing I just wanted to just give Lauren a chance was to kind of talk about what you're doing and how we can contact you. If we wanted to get a hold of you to ask some more questions, or if anybody has like a cannabis business. So you want to talk also about like your quick fire consult program too?
I do have an Instagram if y'all want to follow me there, Fired Up Lawyer. I post updates about rescheduling and DCC regulations and events like this webinar and other things like this, and fun, silly things as well. So you can follow me on Instagram, Fired Up Lawyer. If you have any specific questions or want to reach me directly, it's fireduplawyer@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, fireduplawyer.com. In my handouts right now, I'm offering a new service called Quickfire Consultations, where it's just the opportunity to talk to a lawyer, get specific answers to specific questions really quickly over the phone without having to do a full legal consultation. So those are on my website, fireduplawyer.com. And just stay fired up with me.
I love it. Or you can look for Lauren in the banana costume sometimes.
Compliance is
Emerald Cup or
bananas.
anything like
Cannabis
that.
compliance is bananas, not cheap.
Not cheap, no. Well, this has been really wonderful, Lauren. Thank you so much for spending this time and like breaking down the retail cannabis structure and answering all of our questions. I know that it's not easy, but I hope that we made this really fun and enjoyable as much as we could, making it something like kind of difficult and, convoluted, fun, and easy to understand. So thank you so much for being our guest speaker tonight. It's been really fun to have you on. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you and all that you've done for the industry, given like 2 decades of yourself to this industry, and like how much you've done. Like Prop 64 has changed the world, whether people, love it or hate it. Like it's changed the course of history. And look, $6 billion to California, no one can argue with that,
And
So
for those of you who don't know, Candace is 10 times more awesome than she says I am. She has been a local advocate in Southern California in the tough region of Orange County, first fighting for patients and getting regulations in place, leading local ballot initiatives so that patients can have safe access to medicine, helping me on the Prop 64 campaign, continuing to fight the city councils and county supervisors to get reasonable regulations, and then working with these cannabis companies to make sure patients can get donations and free cannabis and education like this. And she's a mom of 2. I have no kids but cats, so I love to give a shout out to Candace. She's one of my best friends and heroes, and so thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody for watching. This has been really wonderful. And we hope that we were able to share some information with all of you that will help you become better informed cannabis consumers. And the information that we helped share today will help you find relief. Looking forward to seeing you all next time for another episode of the Friends of the Farm Lecture Series.